Yo, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Expanded Understanding episode. I think it's 82. I think I keep count right. I'm not really sure. It doesn't really matter. Numbers are approximations, and I think that's a good thing to remember for all of us. So, I mean, maybe really like entirely in our life, we spend a lot of time like looking for truth or looking for what the reality of something is, but really at the end of the day, we end up landing on an approximation regardless because it's functionally just an approximation of whatever data we've happened to get our hands on. We never can actually cultivate every single piece of data that could ever be out there about something. It's not even necessary to do that in order to ever make a decision about something. I spent a lot of time like toiling with the concept of when is enough enough. I've been known in the past to really like kind of like put myself through the shit because I find some kind of glory in going through this like really treacherous, arduous battle or difficulty or something like that. Over the last several years of my life, I just kind of like lost its appeal to me. I was not really interested anymore in going through the difficult battle or whatever. I mean, they have like there's a lot of these like euphemisms or stories that kind of point towards the idea of like the warrior that's been through a lot of battles eventually decides to like kind of like lay down his shield or whatever, and he's not really like doing the battle thing anymore. And during this time, that's kind of resonated with me a lot. I really like operated a lot of my life being very revolutionary. Really not like towards any specific purpose or anything. Just really like if everybody else thought it should be done, I was not really doing it myself. Um, I think it was a really weird way of just actually being guided by societal conditioning the entire time, thinking that I was completely free of it and completely free of, well, really like something outside of me telling me what to do, or could otherwise be said as like I believed I had my sovereignty. But over the last several years of my life, I've really realized how, while what I had was some kind of format of sovereignty, really since I always had like such a strong drive to go against the grain, really the grain was still telling me where to go because wherever the grain was going, I was going to go the opposite direction of that. And functionally, that made me like, very easy to control if you were looking at it from that perspective. I don't necessarily think that there's any type of group out there trying to control me or anything. I think that I completely lack control of myself. And that is the reason why I'm not able to do what I want in my life. And I think the same stands true for every other person. And I mean, like, that's kind of fundamental to any kind of the work I do, which there's really like a wide range of it. But it all really kind of functions around actualizing goals. And I believe the thing that stands between us and our goals is pretty much always us. It's kind of the idea Gary Vaynerchuk postulates, who is a marketer, so he's public speaker, motivational person. Nevertheless, he has this concept about basically optimism, that it's not really about whether the glass is half full or glass half empty, but what you can do with what you have in the glass. And that's very much so my approach to life at this point in time is, not really just like in any situation that I'm in, I figure out what I want to do and I figure out how to get it done. I don't really look at roadblocks to that as something that stops me from doing it, but really just like the next thing along the process of getting it done. This has been really, really beneficial for my life in a lot of ways and kind of troubling in other ways. But the trouble that's been provided from it, I feel in a certain way that like, well, when I talk about it, I kind of feel like I'm like complaining about suffering from success or something, because I feel very much so that I've kind of now freed myself from like having to do something. But I realize in that I'm not really very good at doing what I want. I was much better at doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I realized through that I held on to a lot of stories like the idea of a mission, or really in a lot of ways for me like even the ideas of like past lives or my continuity into the past period has come into question over the idea that really in many ways like my past as I was postulating it, which in many ways throughout my life has like touched into past lives and star seed stuff and all these various different things, that really these were just like kind of like ways of justifying to myself why I don't do what I know I should do right now when I'm trying to accomplish something. And these, for me, were ways that I was effectively it's kind of like a highbrow way of tricking myself or sabotaging myself into justifying or otherwise excusing myself into basically settling for something less than what I'm capable of. I'm very happy at this point in time to feel as though that at least on another dimensionality that seems greater than the one I was at before, I feel freed from this. I am in no way, shape, or form sold that I am actually freed from this, because this specific one, I feel like it's actually caught me a couple times. I feel that there's been, I don't even know exactly how many times, but definitely like 3, 4, 5, 6 times something that I felt like, okay, like I got a handle on it. I understand how I've like been conditioned, or how I'm being controlled, or how I'm lacking control, or things like this. And it seems like every time I get one of those, like there's the same kind of cycle goes on, and it's not like some kind of karmic cycle or something like that. More just like a process that reiterates every time. I get to a new dimensionality, and I'm like, holy shit, I finally got it. Like this makes so much more sense. In recent times, even to the point where like my mind kind of toils with the idea of like, does this break reality to be able to for it to click like this? And in certain ways, it does kind of break reality in relative to what you thought reality was before that. But every time that I have that situation, inevitably I progress forward, and I realize that there's like even another layer on top of it, and another layer on top of it. And at one point in time, it's like, I guess it got a little annoying to me. This is about a decade ago, where I had realized, like that I was like screwing myself over, that I was doing things that were hindering myself from accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. And I had noticed this like so many times that I had really like I was getting annoyed with myself, And so I started battling with the idea that like when I would recognize it, I also had to overcome this hump of like, oh God, you idiot, you're fucking doing it again. What's wrong with you? But over time, I'm not sure whether by will or by force, it doesn't really matter. I've become more comfortable with that situation really by coming to appreciate the fact that there is always another dimensionality to it. There has been a couple times where I feel like this process that I'm referring to, like it felt like it took a long time to play out. And I end up in a position where for several months of my life or something like that, a period of time that is long enough for me to be like, this fucking sucks, is basically what I'm getting to. But a period that's long enough where I feel like nothing new is emerging, that a part of me kind of feels like, okay, you've like seen what there is to see in life, which I think honestly is probably fucking ridiculous. I don't even know why I tell myself this sometimes, but it feels that way in the moment. And I kind of start to lose, I guess you could say, like a luster on life, or life seems less bright, because I feel like I've like seen the things that there are to see. And I think we got to be very careful about saying, like these are the best days of our lives, or those were the best days of our lives. And we should really always be focused on trying to make sure like the best day of our life is ahead of us, because we've we came from those other ones. Like we know what made those up. We need to like, leverage into that, add other things, and, make something that's even better. And I really think that's like, I think that's kind of like this twist that happens with a person when they go from like child to adult, where they stop like kind of looking forward and they start looking backwards. And really, and I'm not going to dig like super deep into it in this specific episode, but really with a lot of the ways that I look at kind of like the function of reality, from what I would consider a scientific standpoint, although I can see where some other people would like look at that and be like, oh, you can't prove any of that or whatever. And I mean, yeah, it's kind of scary how much of it I can prove. But nevertheless, the point is that I think looking backwards is actually significantly more dangerous than we give it credit for. I think focusing on your past and the things that have happened in your past very much so cause them to replicate themselves into the future, because functionally that's what you're asking for receiving. And when we really do learn what we need to learn from a situation, we have a tendency not to look at the past the same way regarding that thing. We really do resculpt it. And as a byproduct of that, I think we are really like bringing the past into the future, and we have a tendency to focus on it. I mean, I don't think that necessarily this should be used as some kind of bypass, and I don't think that we should throw out anything that we think we can derive value from. But at the same time, I think that we should also be like skeptical and critically analyzing the data that we're taking in, our consumption. I think we should always be aware of our consumption, basically, and we always need to know like what thoughts we're consuming, what they're doing to us, what effects they're having on our outlook to the future, how are they affecting us moving into the next moment. Really, like everything that I work in has to do with this stuff. I mean, I'm heavy into education. Education is all about, like, what kind of information needs to get put in front of someone to get them from point A to point B, something that I've like spent a ton of time brainstorming on, tons of time creating content for. Haven't really ever released it per se, but it's definitely something that I will get to in my life. Is like, and I would like to hear anybody's opinions on this. There's a lot of times it's kind of cliche, you could even say that it is now, where people are basically saying, like, this is what we should be teaching in high school, or they're so surprised that that's not taught in high school. Like, I was never taught how to balance my checkbook in high school. I never was taught what compounding interest was in high school, or whatever the case may be like this. I would really like to hear what are some things that you really feel like, what the fuck, why aren't we teaching these things in high school? Because I fully intend to, with myself and with the help of other people who are interested in these exact same things, functionally put together. I don't know what when I brainstorm it, kind of, I guess you got a code name for it. It's like a sovereignty playbook where this is actually going to provide that shit that you probably should have been taught in high school, free of charge, of course. And it's just I think everybody should have this. It should be public knowledge. It should be taught in public schools. Somebody's just got to step up to the fucking plate and put it together. And we need some type of system that we can go through that teaches us the things that we need to know on like a ground floor level to establish our sovereignty. Like, if you think you're going to reach for the stars without having like a solid foundation, I mean, more power to you. Please have fun trying, or whatever the case is. But this hasn't shown to work out very well for people in the past. And it's best to establish a foundation. Really, honestly, I think was what we're trying to do. We'll call it spiritually. We're not actually really even trying to get away from the human body. I think we're trying to integrate the whole of the experience. I think this is the idea of omnipresence or omniscience or anything like that, or really the concept of what anyone postulates as God or any kind of higher power. It really is the thing that contains all things. So we shouldn't really be looking necessarily to exclude things, but rather how to include things. And I think we need, as far as this education, how it ties into what I was just saying, we need to leverage into these things where we understand kind of the process that's taking place, and the way that things are growing and why they're moving that way. And this is like what I do with my whole life. I basically watch data and see why it moves the way that it does, and then figure out, like, if that movement is inefficient, how can we make that movement more efficient? I do this from spirituality to business to finance to computing. Everything I do is doing that because that's what I'm good at. Like, I don't know if it's the best way or whatever, but I know I'm fucking good at it. So I keep doing it and I really enjoy it. Um Actual history. Yeah, I mean, and that's a fucking tentative topic right there, right? Like, I mean, what's taught in school right now, somebody's claiming that's factual history. I know what you're referencing for sure. I think, definitely something to do with, history. Maybe, how do you feel about this? The idea of history being presented as not so much of this is what happened, but here's what could have happened. Here's the fucking things that we have and what we've looked at. And, allow people, because we don't really fucking know, right? Like, we don't know what happened 10,000 fucking years ago. Even the ones of us that feel that we're very, like, aware or whatever, we feel like maybe we took in more data or we saw something other people didn't see, but we don't really fucking know. Yeah. Uh, I don't think any of it, you're referring to like the stuff being removed from public knowledge. I think that is just like a travesty against information to basically take it out of the public eye. I think all information is really functionally supposed to be open source. I think it's like the function of a weird capitalistic society that tries to basically put like value on an intellectual property. If we truly are a collected consciousness and operating from a big mind, like, you don't have intellectual property. The collected consciousness has intellectual property. You're just like borrowing some of it. So if that's actually the case, which a lot of things are pointing to that's probably the case, then this idea of like copyrighted intellectual property is kind of an interesting situation. It's kind of a flimsy one, anyways. It's like, I can't exactly copy what your internet platform does, for instance, but I can basically copy it. I just got to like change around the imagery, not use like your exact stuff, like shit like that. But I can basically do the exact same thing that you do. And, you know, are there's nothing wrong with that. I just can't do it pretending to be you, basically. And when we get to even deeper levels of intellectual property, it's like, for instance, like an algorithm or something like that that is held as intellectual property, or even just like a process of doing things. Like it, you can't stop somebody else from researching and developing the exact same process. That's impossible really to do. You might be able to hold some type of situation where it's like, well, according to patent law, and I can take you to court and da 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 da. You can't sell this because the process I have it and it's got an intellectual property patent on it or whatever. But y- and you can't stop them from doing it, really. I mean, like you can stop them from selling it on an open market, but you can't stop them from making it in their bathroom or whatever is the point that I'm making. Uh, so according to mainstream scholars, Mayan being primitive still know more about the cycles of this planet and time than we do currently. It's so interesting to me how much like Mayan shit is popping up in my life the last I guess it's been about 4 days, maybe 3 days. I don't know. But like, it's always weird to me when something makes like a resurgence through many, many different people. And like, I hadn't even been looking at it at all. Like, I haven't looked at anything that was Mayan in fucking months, really. Like, I'm super into the Zolkin, fractal time, time cycles, dream spells, wave spells. I'm all about it. But at the same time, I haven't really thought about it in fucking honestly months. And then over the last couple days, it's fucking popped up everywhere. Like it seems like everybody's talking about it. A lot of times I think that this is like telling me to go and look at something. But really, honestly, I've looked at the Zolkin so much, I don't even know what to go and look at this point in time. Like, I don't really honestly feel like there's more to look at for me. I mean, I guess I could spend more time like drawing basically anecdotal correlation going like, okay, well, I run this person's chart and they're this, and then they act like this, and okay, here's another person too, similarities, differences, is this shit on point? I don't know. One of my like I would say my major bone to pick with the Mayan calendar is that there's so much disagreement about what day this thing is supposed to start. And obviously that determines all dates that you're working with right now. And in my own personal use with it, I have actually found the most effect with a date that no one else subscribes to. It is, however, very closely corroborated to the day that the most people subscribe to. But based off of my own anecdotal correlations, I came to realize that, especially with the people that I was working with in my life, what I had found at that time to be basically the primary agreed upon date, it was actually more functional for me to always actually run people's mind kin off the day before the day they were born. And I drew some assertions as to why this was, but nevertheless, it just seemed more accurate that way. And it's a weird situation. I've played with these kinds of, we'll call them I don't know, metalogical. We'll call them metalogical systems, where they're logical systems that have to do with something that is metaphysical, right? So it's either about like time, or it's about your soul, or your spirit, or the stars, or I guess a star is physical, but nevertheless, the point is like I've dealt with a lot of these, and I've found that there's like oftentimes just as much benefit, or at least especially in the side of like learning about the thing, just as much benefit from just like grabbing the system and playing with it, and even seeing like, moving shit around and seeing if it's works better a different way, just to see, just to see. There's certain systems that I have found like, well, they already had that pretty well situated. Like astrology is a good example of this. I've played around with astrological meanings a lot, and while they will seem like I'm onto something in some cases, usually I think the standard interpretation of it is actually like more accurate. Realize astrology is an extremely well sculpted system. It has been around for a very long time, uh, arguably longer than math. So that's kind of crazy. And nevertheless, like I think it's beneficial to play with these systems and see how they fit. The Zolkin's one of those. If you read your Mayan kin and you're like, I don't know what this is saying, this doesn't really resonate to me. Try reading the days right around it. Maybe there's a reason why it's actually different. I don't know what it is, but another would be ancient Egyptians. Like clearly the pyramids function as power plants. I mean, it would be interesting to know more about Egyptology just in the public eye, period. It seems very clear that there's some tomfoolery afoot in the old Egyptology department. So, interesting situation on that one. Been very into Egyptology in my life too, and like, wow, man, there's just like, I there's so much bullshit in that space. It's actually kind of crazy. There's a lot of really cool information from the space, especially if you check out like outlier people. With the closest that I would still call an outlier would be a guy named John Anthony West. But there's a lot of people that kind of rotate out from him that are like kind of even further out of the public eye of Egyptology, but have some really great thoughts. For instance, one of them would be like a completely no-name guy named Edward Nightingale that basically broke down all the measurements of the Giza Plateau through this simple, very simple system that had to do with, it was a completely addition system, addition and subtraction. And all it did was, it was like working with doubling and tripling of numbers. And you could understand those as multiplication if you wanted to, but definitely the way that he was using the system was using nothing but addition. And he was coming at it from this angle that like, look, like I'm not like some fucking brilliant dude. Like I'm a builder, but this kind of like makes sense to me. And he started doing all these fucking measurements all over the place. And sure enough, man, his shit seems to like dial in real nice. And when you start going like deeper into the esoterics, you start getting these expressions of these doubling and tripling systems. And it seems like, he might really be onto something that is actually even like beyond what he thought he was onto, right? Like he's notices all these really interesting measurements, but doesn't really even maybe understand the like the true why behind. Like, sure, they use a double and tripling system. Why? Why the fuck did they do that? Is there a reason that they encoded these basically these functions so deeply into what they're mathematically calculating here? And I personally think that there is. I mean, I think that, well, I like John Dee a lot. And when we're looking at like the work of John Dee, it's always important to remember that like the core concept of number from John Deeism, which is a thing that I just made up, but nevertheless is that from zero emerges one, from one emerges two, from two emerges three. And so like we have this doubling and tripling thing that's coming here, but from this way of looking at it, John Dee looks at numbers, and I mean, he ain't the only guy, but he writes about it. He has a whole book about it and a symbol dedicated to it, and I think he knew more than everybody else about it. Nevertheless, this kind of doubling and tripling system is a natural emergence from what we are already doing as a singular system, as a one, or even that one thing actually being a zero, being as that it came forth from the zero. Even the idea that Tesla's has of basically this idea of the 3, 6, and the 9, you can understand this as 3 actually being the important number. 3 doubled is 6, and 3 tripled is 9. So really, like 9 is just 3 threes, right? So, or 2 threes, or 1 threes. And so the whole 3, 6, 9 system is actually kind of telling us that 3 is really the only thing that matters, because like you have a system of 3 that's made up of 3 systems of 3. And this is kind of the same thing that ties back into the Zolkin. When we're talking about fractal timelines or fractal scales like that, then you have these types of situations happening all of the time. If the whole can be broken down into 3, then any one of those 3 parts could be broken down into 3 parts. And the same thing goes if you're working with doubling systems. Nevertheless, doubling and tripling systems, very interesting. The entire idea of being like the whole like twin flame idea, or the twinning idea, seems to be like a doubling system. And there seems to be even a system kind of beyond that, that then, much like John Dee spoke about it, from the interaction of the two things. So I'm a 1 and I want to become a 2. So I meet another 1. That's you. We come together and we start interfacing. 2 are now operating as 1 because 2 emerged from 1 in both of our spaces. But as we come together and we start to work together, we realize that we're never actually becoming the same thing. We're always interacting. And that means that there's an extremely important space that can be understood kind of like a circumpunct, either inside or outside. What's more important than now either of the 1s or the 2 is rather this third space that has been created that they reside in or that they are functioning around, right? And so inevitably, from the one thing, it eventually seeks to recreate itself and work with itself, but realizes then that this creates functionally a third interaction. This idea here, one emerging from zero, two emerging from one, three emerging from two, it seems to be a very deeply coded thing inside of reality. Realize that this is functionally a Fibonacci progression up to that point. So if you want to get down into it, at that point in time, really when we're just looking at those scales, phi is still functionally coded into it. We're using like a 1.5 approximation rather than a 1.6 approximation. But when we do the standard Fibonacci sequence of the 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, this kind of thing like that, realize like inside of that we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3. And this straight order of numbers right there is completely unique inside of the Fibonacci sequence. It's the only place inside of the Fibonacci sequence that whole numbers actually go in a linear order with every step inside of there. When they get beyond that, now just immediately the next step, 5. We already missed out on 4. The next one after this, 8. We missed out on 6 and 7. And now you're seeing this thing happening again because we just missed out on 1. We just missed out on 2. How many are we going to miss out on next time? Like, so the situation, like we get these emergences of these these things always emerge. There's so much to be looked at in this, and it's really just not really very looked at, but it seems to be encoded inside of the Giza Plateau. So it definitely seems that these individuals knew a lot more. And when I say ancient Egyptians, realize I don't really even think it was ancient Egyptians. There's a relatively unknown individual who actually discovered all kinds of things inside of Egypt. And his postulation was actually the pharaonic Egypt built on top of another culture that he referred to as the Kemetic culture. And he believed that they actually came from the Ethiopian highlands and they made their way down the Nile from the Ethiopian highlands. And really, honestly, that Cairo and that area kind of was actually like the end of where their land was. Okay, so that this was just like a lower valley that really like their where was grand for them, where their kings would have stayed, would have been in what is the modern day Ethiopian highlands. So nevertheless, this is there's a lot of interesting correlations about that too. And if you start looking into like megalithic archaeology, basically, you'll come to find out that almost everywhere that you go with megalithic archaeology, some other culture built on top of that motherfucker. And then we look at Egypt and we go, oh, nope, pharaonic Egypt was here and they were the only dudes here. And based off all the other megalithic sites, there's a really good chance that somebody built right on top of this shit that was there. That they were already like, this shit is cool. Let's build right on top of it. Realize we are literally doing that right now. That's why the city of Cairo is progressively encroaching closer and closer to the side of the Great Pyramids and the Giza Plateau, because we're literally building the city of Cairo basically right on top of the motherfuckers at this point in time. There's a reason why those things got put there in the first place, and those reasons aren't just because like that's a cool place or whatever. It's the Nile Delta and shit like that. Like it's, as far as Sahara goes, a good fucking place to be. Having said that, at the point in time that these pyramids and stuff would have showed up there, this is a drastically different place than it is today. Because if we go far enough back in the geologic record, we come to find out that the place that is now the Sahara Desert used to actually be an extremely lush rainforest. And we don't really know when, I mean, we have good ideas of where that might be, like in terms of time, but we don't really know when these pyramids were built. So they might have been built there when there was a fucking jungle there, or they might have been built there when it was a big desert. We don't really know. Göbekli Tepe, as far as I know, that is still what being considered the oldest site found. And Göbekli Tepe is definitely a very interesting one because if the dating of that is right, it already has basically fucked the story of history, right? Like the story of history already has to be wrong in order for Göbekli Tepe datings to be right. So if anyone doesn't know, that's because Göbekli Tepe is dated to be a 12,000-year-old site, but Göbekli Tepe clearly shows signs of organized civilization. And as far as history, modern history, standard mainstream history, believes civilized civilization that was organized did not start working together until approximately 4,000 years ago in Sumeria, when we basically figured out how to do agriculture and shortly thereafter animal husbandry. So we believe that only about 4,000 years ago, motherfuckers started acting civil in any capacity. But Gobekli Tepe certainly shows that, probably before that, boys, and quite possibly way before that. If it's 8,000 years before that, like, fuck, man, a lot could have happened in that space. Realize the whole of what we are taught about history is basically 4,000 years back, and realize as you start getting close to that 4,000 years, there's a big jump. You basically go, like, through everything that is AD, and then when you start getting to zero, you like jump to like the 230s to 300 time. You hear about ancient Greece, you hear about fucking Alexander the Great and shit like that. And then if you're not really into history, you basically then go boom and you jump all the way back to Egypt after that for the most part in like standard mainstream history, which they're claiming is like 4,000 years ago. So you're taking a jump from basically like 230 to 300 BC all the way back to 4,000 fucking years ago, which would have been like 2000 BC, which means you're basically just throwing out the window like 1900 years of happenings, and like we don't have any fucking idea what happened in that time. So, nevertheless, even that period, everything that we do know about history right now, we're saying that that took place in approximately a 4,000 year period. And I think it's quite interesting that we say that the beginning of the world is minus 2000, basically, from our 0 point, which we call, the birth of Christ, basically. Which, if you think that the calendar changed because a kid got born, I don't know why you think calendars are made. If like, what the fuck would be the point if we're just like, guess what, dude? I had a kid last week. You know what? Now it's May 3rd. It doesn't fucking make any sense, boys. Your calendar should not ever be based off of somebody being born. That's fucking ridiculously arbitrary. And if the whole timing of everything is ridiculously arbitrary, you say I need to show up on Thursday, but your perception of Thursday is fucking ridiculously arbitrary. So I'll just show up 5 Sundays from now, and we'll just call it good enough. Because it's all fucking arbitrary anyways. That was next Thursday to me. Thursday only comes once every 5 weeks, and it's when it was supposed to be Sunday. I know my calendar's fucking weird, but we're all just making it up anyways, because honestly, our calendar is based off the arbitrary birth of an individual who quite possibly never fucking existed. What? What kind of sense does that make? And by the way, that ain't the only calendar on the planet. That's the calendar that Western culture follows. That's definitely not the only calendar. Chinese people got a calendar. Mayan calendar is obviously also a calendar. Mayan calendar does actually, like, the interesting thing is that there's a big argument about the Mayan calendar start date, but if the Mayan calendar works the way that we believe that it works, meaning that it's fractal, the Mayan calendar does not begin or end. It just keeps changing. And it never started. It just was, and it was going, and this is the pattern that was going. At some point in time, something became aware of the pattern, but that didn't make the pattern be there. It didn't start the calendar. Literally, obviously, I mean, we literally call it after death, before Christ. We mark the fucking situation, which, like, realize it's kind of weird. Okay, so Jesus lived for 33 years, according to their story. And apparently, in that 33 years, no time passed, because functionally 0 is marking the differential between before Christ, which means that in 1 AD, Christ had come, right? Because 0 was the delineating line. -1 or 1 BC would have been 1 year before Christ. So Christ came in 0. But any date after 0 is called after death, because any date after 0 is actually marked by the date of his crucifixion. So where the fuck was the 33 years, dude? Where did 33 years go? I mean, it doesn't matter because the dude's fucking made up anyways. If he's anybody, he's a guy named Saint Isha. He pieced out to fucking Tibet, and he's actually buried over there right now. You can go see his grave if you want. Like, if he actually was a real guy. I ain't got nothing against the teachings of Jesus Christ or any of these religions. I think at their core, they teach people to be a good person and be good unto themselves. And I think the core of every single one of these is to know yourself And these are all just stories that help you get to the knowing. I don't have anything wrong with these religions. I have a problem with people buying into things and using them as a logical structure when they completely lack logic, because that's fucking ridiculous. Like, we can't say it's logical when it doesn't have any logic. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to subscribe to lying to myself just to, like, be the same, you know? So these, nevertheless, the point is these dates are arbitrary. Time is arbitrary. You don't fucking know what time it is. You know, you look at the clock and agree. That's what you know. I understand this in a very visceral sense, because I about fucking lost my mind one time because I couldn't fucking agree with the clock. I just didn't believe it. It just didn't seem right. And, you know, I got out of that space by basically being like, fuck it, dude. Really, honestly, I've always just been agreeing with the clock. I'll just do it again. I guess it's fucking 12:32 now. All right. Fuck it. Who really cares? I mean, this podcast supposedly been going on for 46 minutes and 58 seconds. How long does it feel like it's been on for you? Because it probably doesn't feel the same amount of time for all of us. So it doesn't really matter. This shit is all real fucking arbitrary. But if we're going to be arbitrary with things and then we're going to sculpt our life around it systematically and logically, we might want to actually stick to systems and logic, or, you know, we're going to run into a problem. Really, it doesn't matter what day it is. It doesn't really matter what time it is. What really matters is, like, what you're doing with your time, right? Like, who fucking cares what day it is? The only reason that I actually had this realization at one point in time, that really, honestly, the only reason why we care what day it is right now is because we're worried about when we're going to die. And then it has also led to this interesting realization that when someone actually, like, celebrated a birthday, what they were actually celebrating was getting closer to death. But they don't look at it that way. They go like, oh man, I'm 1 year older. This is the day that I was born. But it's like, yeah, but you know what? After 85 of these, our statistics say there's a 90% chance your ass is going to be fucking dead. So you're technically celebrating being a year closer to your death right now. I mean, why not just celebrate Tuesday, the 128th day of the month? Like, why the fuck not? Fuck it. I celebrate every day of my life. I'm happy to be here now. It's my birthday today. When I wake up in the morning, I try to resurrect myself. That's like basically my idea. If I went to sleep, then when I'm waking up, anything could have happened. I just closed my eyes for like who knows how many hours. I think it was like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. But what fucking proof do I have of that? Like, really? I don't really have any proof. It could have been like 4 months. But I just, like, didn't notice, and everybody fucking agreed, and they're all trolling me. I mean, like, it's unlikely, but it could be. Like, I don't really fucking know. I just, like, wake up, and everything seems to be in the right place, and I'm like, all right, everything's fucking fine. I guess I'm okay. I don't even actually know that I'm in the same reality. You might not even wake up in the same fucking body every day. There might be 50 gazillion versions of your body throughout the multiverse, and they all live for 1 day. And you fucking die every time you go to sleep. But you don't give a fuck because you wake up in your body again. So who fucking cares that that other one died? I didn't fucking need it anyways. Its knee hurt. You know? Why is sleep the most healing time for the human body? What if you fucking go to sleep in one body, wake up in a different one? You just don't realize it changing out. Right? And that's why you heal. I don't fucking know. You know? I don't have any proof for that. I mean, really, do we have any proof for anything? Things seem very likely sometimes. But proof, yeah. I don't know. Proof and truth are words that are, people should probably be a little bit more careful with them, because they mean very grandiose things. But oftentimes when we use them, we're not using them in the way that they mean. My mycelium needed to come out on a certain date. Now they're pinning and coming in nice. Yeah. I mean, like, I think things do happen at the time that they're supposed to happen. I've been talking recently to a lot of people about a concept that actually, I've just been doing this for, honestly, a really fucking long time. I don't even remember when it started. And it actually kind of goes a lot of ways, but it's really core around the idea of learning. What does that mean? How do we do it? We haven't really been taught. So if is the way that we're doing it just the best that we can come up with, or is it the best that there actually is? I don't think anybody actually knows. So I consider this a position that is ripe for development. So I spend a lot of time developing in the learning sphere. How can we learn more effectively? And one thing that I've come to find is that it seems that, especially in certain sectors, and I won't spend too much time like dissecting which ones are and aren't, but especially in certain sectors, you kind of fucking learn shit when you're supposed to learn it. You can put in enormous amounts of time where you're like grinding and you're like, you're churning through some kind of book or listening to all this shit trying to learn about it. Or you can kind of like just keep it in a contemplation for that period of time. This especially comes with things where you feel like you need like an epiphany, right? Like where it's like, I feel like I have the fucking data, but it just won't click. You can sit there and just like, focus way hard into the fucking data and go through it, like spend all your time on it. But it seems that if you just like want to know the answer and keep that in your fucking contemplation and just go through your life, it inevitably emerges anyways. And I mean, obviously, like I don't have a fucking, well, splitting hairs here. There's if we choose one thing, it seems as though to the standard reality that we cannot choose the other thing. So we don't actually know whether or not it would have come faster if we had done this than it did if we had done this. And we're never going to know that. But I have watched a lot of cases with this, and I've watched people completely pour themselves into trying to figure something out, and it just really doesn't come to fruition. And then all of a sudden, one day it kind of clicks. And really, through doing that myself and through other people, I came to realize that it's like, well, we never really learned the thing over time. We learned the thing in this like sudden moment where it's like, oh, fuck, I get it. There's this one moment. And so what if we literally just have to wait for that moment to show up and be open to that moment being there? Would I then have, the epiphany, even though I hadn't spent a bunch of time focusing on it? And if yes, would I then be able to dedicate the time that I otherwise would have been focusing on that to something else that would actually benefit from focusing on it? I personally have found in, I guess what we'll call my research, I have found this to be true. If things I feel like they need like this snap realization, it's very clearly delineated to me in my own mental process when I'm gathering data that can be acquired and when I need more data that I cannot acquire yet. And if I'm at the position where I need more data that I cannot acquire yet, I literally just fucking wait. Like, it's like the idea of the anglerfish. The anglerfish is a big fish that sits on the bottom of the ocean down in the midnight zone that basically has no light. So down where it has no light, light is very attractive to things. It's very interesting. So the anglerfish sits down on the bottom of the ocean in the midnight zone where it's like pitch black dark, and it has a thing that hangs from the front of its head out in front of its face, kind of like the idea of a carrot on a stick, and it has a light on the end of it that's bioluminescent. It sits on the ocean floor and lights up this light, and other shit chooses to swim over there and look at the light, and it gets fucking devoured by this thing, the anglerfish. It gets devoured by the anglerfish. So this thing's basically entire hunting strategy is just to sit there and wait and make the stuff come to it. And so if this is a hunting mechanism that works in nature, then the question really is just, is this a hunting mechanism that works in nature? Because learning is the process of hunting information, finding it, acquiring it, and then bringing it back to your home. Basically, it's the fucking same thing. So if hunting like this works for the anglerfish, it probably works for hunting data too. In my experience, it seems to definitely work for hunting data too. I'm not big on the reading books and shit these days because of it, because I found that there's reasons why books are good, but there's also reasons why books are bad. So it's an interesting balance that you have when you start engaging with something that's like so sculpted like that, but it wasn't sculpted by you. And there is certain, when something is very heavily sculpted but not sculpted by you, you can pretty much guarantee that that sculpture is not perfect for your reality. There's some portions of it you're going to have to throw out. So even if it is crafted by a master, there's probably some parts of that master's craft that you will need to remove in order to have that master's craft fit into the space that you actually want it to fit into. So there is still work to be done, even if it is the work of a master. Oftentimes, if you're trying to make it relevant to a different space, right? So like Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, but he'd have to slightly adjust it if he wanted to put it on the, the ceiling of the, I don't know, the Toyota Center, some big arena somewhere, right? Like it's a different ceiling. Shit fits different. And if you wanted to put it over there, even if it had the same content, it would get laid out differently. So, if you're trying to paint the Sistine Chapel, either make the building exactly the fucking same or don't try to copy every brush stroke. You know what I'm saying? realize when it comes to like advice about your human life or something like that, even business advice, you can't just straight bolt on someone else's advice because even if it worked for them 5 days ago, today the market is different than 5 days ago. It's not dramatically different, but it is different. And so it's not going to be a perfect bolt on, even just based off the fact that, like, the dude who told you about this already did that. That's why he knows about it. And so that changes the market in and of itself. And it's impossible for something not to be changed as it goes through time. Just simply the fact that it is at a different time, but the way that we perceive it is an intrinsic change to the object. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's enough rambling probably for me tonight. You know, just straight spamming you with talking for 46 minutes. There's probably plenty of worthwhile stuff in there. I honestly, like, I don't even know. Like, I hope, I guess in a certain way, like, I hope other people hear this and hear something from it. But I think in a certain way, like, I'm also learning how to, like, muse myself. I've been musing other people in my life for a while where, like, I answer their questions, talking to them, etc., like, gets me talking and gets me to go through my thoughts in a way that I don't normally go through my thoughts. And progressively over the past year, I've been very much so trying to figure out how to. It's not that I only want to be able to do that with myself. Like, I don't want to be some shut-away hermit, but I also don't want to be dependent on other people to access a specific state. And I really think through, like, doing videos on Instagram and doing Instagram lives and podcasts and other kinds of micro content shit. I really have kind of gotten into a situation where I can just, like, sit down and start talking into a microphone, and then the things that I'm looking for is happening. So hopefully you enjoy listening in on this session of the random musings of Zach's brain about whatever the fuck happens to come across it. Uh, you know, it's probably more fun to listen to than what I've been spending most of my day on, because I've spent the last 16 hours basically learning about stock options, investment strategies, and all kinds of various stuff like that. And that's not standard fare for the channel, although I think it is very valuable information for anybody who wants to work inside of a fiduciary system, one that basically has anything to do with exchange, and especially modern day exchange, because they all use monies. And so it's very beneficial. But nevertheless, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Please like, subscribe, all the things. Check out the social media links below. I know I don't say anything about this stuff until like 58 minutes in a video, so I ain't very good pitching for myself, but whatever. Whoever wants to watch it will watch it, and if they don't, they won't. All right. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful night. Aaron's off doing very important stuff tonight, so he wasn't here, but he will be back with us on our next show, which will be on the 24th. Yeah. A Jen's show will be on the 24th as well at 6 o'clock. So we got Jen going down at 6. Us going down at 8, and then the next night we'll have Frank at 6, and us following up after whatever time Frank gets done. So hopefully you guys check that shit out. Hopefully you guys have a stupendous day. Focus on your future. Focus on what you can create right now. Don't use excuses to short sell yourself into a bad position. Life is all about leverage, and you have the ability to create your own. Have a good night.